Here are 4 common ways to immigrate to Canada in 4 minutes. My name is Cedric Marin. I'm an immigration lawyer at Hulth Immigration Law. So the very first way, express entry from outside Canada, is called federal skilled workers. There are minimum eligibilities that you have to meet as it relates to 1 year of continuous work experience and a minimum level of education, minimum language level in French or English. This is called eligibility. Once you are eligible, you are able to create an express entry profile. What Canada does is every few weeks, they take the top individuals of the pool, invite them to apply for permanent residence. Once you create your profile, you're going to answer questions about your education, your level of French, your level of English, your age, your marital status, and you're going to get certain points on your situation. As I mentioned, the top points every few weeks receive an invitation to apply for permanent residence. When you arrive to Canada, you arrive with your permanent residence, which means you can work and study as much or as little as you'd like. There is an obligation to stay inside Canada for a certain number of days. This being said, it's a great way to come to Canada and obtain a permanent residence. Number 2, study, work, and then express entry. So if you want to come to Canada and study, we have some of the best schools in the world are located inside Canada. You'd ideally come to Canada for at least a study program of at least 2 years to obtain a 3-year work permit based on your studies, which is called a post-graduation work permit. What you need to know for the study permit is that you're probably going to have higher tuition fees because you're a foreign student. Canada is really expensive as a country. And with your study permit, you are allowed to work for 20 hours a week during the school term and full-time during authorized breaks, like the summer. You need to be able to pay your tuition up front or show that you are able to pay for your tuition. And you need to have sufficient funds for your stay, which is usually going to be in addition about $10,000, depending on your family configuration. What's great to know about the study permit is that if you come with your spouse, they can receive an open work permit, which means they can work for any employer full-time inside Canada. Once you complete your program of study, you're able to apply for a post-graduation work permit. This is an open work permit, and as I mentioned, if your program of study is at least 2 years, you can get a post-graduation work permit for 3 years. It is an open work permit, the post-graduation work permit, which means you can work for any employer and any occupation. Now, you're going to want to work in a skilled occupation to make sure that you obtain points for express entry. The third way to immigrate to Canada is applying for a work permit and then applying for express entry inside Canada. When we speak about a work permit, we're talking about a labor market impact assessment. An employer needs to prove that no PR, no permanent resident or Canadian is available to do the work. Then, through certain processes and whatnot, the government's going to issue a labor market impact assessment to your employer to be able to hire you as a foreign national. You need to know that a labor market impact assessment is essentially a sponsor by your employer. It's the employer making the application, and it is illegal for employers to recuperate costs or sell LMIAs. You might be LMIA exempt, meaning that your employer does not need a labor market impact assessment. In these cases, for example, certain professionals under the Canada, US, and Mexico agreements, certain free trade agreements inside Canada, certain professionals, if you work for a large company, you might be able to do an intra-company transfer to be able to come to Canada with your employer. That does not require an LMIA, but coming to Canada with a work permit, getting work experience, and applying for express entry is a fantastic way. All right, the fourth way to come to Canada is through a provincial nominee program. These usually require you to have some link to the province. In other words, you have a sibling that's there, you've completed some education inside the province. Each province in Canada, we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. Each of them have their own programs to immigrate to Canada. Some are based on express entry, meaning that you get your PNP through express entry, and some are not based on express entry, meaning that they have their own program requirements. As I mentioned, each province has their own programs. They have anywhere from a handful to a dozen, and so it's hard to pretty much summarize, over 50 to 100 programs in a few moments, but all to say that you may want to explore a provincial nominee program to see if you can immigrate to Canada and obtain your permanent residency. My name is Cedric Marin. I'm a lawyer at Hulth Immigration Law. I'd like to speak to you about how to immigrate to Canada. Thank you so much for your time.